Hey there folks, the #1 King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard fan here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard record, Flight B741. It's no secret at this point that King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, one of Australia's premier rock-based music exports, are musical chameleons in every sense of the term, with some of their best albums from the past few years ranging in genre style from heavy prog influence to pure electronica to thrash metal, among various other things, with their best album overall, in my opinion, 2022's Omnium Gatherum, being a complete and total tapestry of various sounds at different points of their career that they have both recycled time and time again in a variety of different ways, as well as some sounds that have never been seen by them on that record before or since. All of this to say that King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, despite being a wild band in terms of influence and in terms of constant self-reinvention, are remarkably consistent. In fact, you could argue that their weakest efforts came extremely early on in the early 2010s when they first debuted, thanks to records like 12 Bar Bruise and Eyes to the Sky. But as a whole, some of their more recent material hasn't ranked among their best work despite being good, and I feel like their latest studio album, Flight B741, could also be ranked within that category. Flight B741 sees King Giz go in a very jam band, boogie rock kind of direction, and I think that that's actually a really interesting idea for them overall. I mean, I don't think it's a super hot take to say that they, as a band, are very comparable to the jam bands of old, with a lot of people comparing the King Gizzard fanbase to the Grateful Dead / Deadhead fanbase, kind of rightfully so. And as a whole, I think that King Gizzard going in that exact direction stylistically, that very rootsy kind of jam sound, is something that's very promising overall, and the actual execution of the sound here is good. I genuinely enjoy it. I mean, the influences that I just mentioned are pretty forward here. There's no real secret that they're taking a lot of ideas from the realm of the more country southern side of United States rock music of decades that have long since come to pass, but that's not a bad thing whatsoever, and there are a lot of really small details throughout this album that I think really sell it as King Gizzard doing a rootsy album rather than just a rootsy album being done by King Gizzard. It really feels like they're making the sound their own here, whether it's the very loose swing of songs like Antarctica, or it's the sort of call and response, interesting vocals on songs like Risque. Generally speaking, it really does feel like they're taking a sound that is very well known, very easy to predict for many bands, and making it something that is uniquely their own. That being said, I will say that those looking for the more instrumentally proficient side of King Gizzard probably won't find a ton to fawn over here. That's not necessarily to say that the instrumental performances on Flight B741 are weak or anything, they most certainly are not, but at the same time, none of the individual members of the band really shine in any particular way throughout the record, all of them playing their roles extremely well, mind you, but at the same time, if you are the kind of person that really enjoys specific instruments, specific individuals within larger bands like this standing out for a song or two, then this record may not necessarily be for you. I also will say that there's an argument to be made that the general sound of this record gets a little bit stale by the end of its runtime, specifically with the tracks Sad Pilot and Rats in the Sky, with those songs feeling solid but relatively unnotable in the grand scheme of things, but things are tied up pretty nicely at the very end of the record with the track Daily Blues, which is easily the longest song on the record by several minutes with a nearly 8-minute runtime, allowing it to technically be the only real foray into more jam band-esque tendencies throughout this record in terms of length, even if like 7.5 minutes is a 2-minute pop song by most jam band standards, but I think you get my point. There's also some pretty interesting country influences brought about here and there, specifically on tracks like Hog Calling Contest, which is easily one of the better songs on the first half of the record. As a whole, I think that a lot of the influences here are incorporated pretty nicely, and it does feel like they are very solidly drawing from a lot of those classic rootsy kind of albums, whether you want to go for something like the Grateful Dead's Working Man's Dead, or even some maybe kind of early Creedence Clearwater Revival kind of things here or there. I don't think that the drawing of obvious influences from iconic bands is a bad thing, though, because, like I said, King Gizzard make it their own, and I don't necessarily think that this album is necessarily super comparable to any other bands active today doing this kind of sound, not only because it's really King Gizzard's first time doing a full-length studio album like this, but also because, again, it's them doing their own sound. Like I said before, it's King Gizzard doing roots rock, not roots rock being put through a King Gizzard filter. It's them just being themselves in the context of a very specific sound. So, like I said at the beginning of this review, I don't necessarily think this album ranks among the band's best or anything like that. In fact, you could actually argue it's one of their weakest to date in terms of pure quality across the board, with all of the songs here for the most part being good, but none of them truly being great. But that's definitely not a bad thing, especially when you consider how King Gizzard have not really put out any weak material in a long time, and frankly, they're one of the most consistent rock-oriented bands on the planet right now, and it's nice to kind of see them grounded in a more rootsy sort of sound that draws on their jam influences rather than continuing to experiment with some genre experimentations within the realm of electronic or thrash metal or anything else they've been experimenting with in recent time. Not that I've ever minded those gimmicks, because they have ultimately worked out really well and come from a place of sheer passion for the band, obviously, but still, it is nice to hear them kind of grounded here, even if for the most part, it doesn't end up being their best material. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5, though, because it's still light, fluffy stuff, and I really enjoy it, so whatever. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. Thanks for watching The Infinite Jukebox, and I'll see you in the next one.